Hi, you folks. Justin Skeens coming to you live today from my personal pistol range here out in sunny Central Ohio. Been a hot one today. I haven't put up a video in a while. Thought that I'd throw one out there. Wanted to cover some things with you today. Kind of give you some basics of what to expect when you go through my class. Going to set you up with some fundamentals for pistol shooting. Hopefully it'll help everybody out a little bit. We're going to work through a little bit of stance work. I'm going to show you a little bit about the isosceles position and the modified weaver position that I used to use. Mainly teach the isosceles position at this point. It's fairly natural and easy to assume. We're going to cover some elements of a good grip. Talk about aiming, both sight picture and sight alignment. We're going to work through with some of my teaching tools here. Hopefully help everybody get a visual on what you're trying to find with that really good sight picture when you're trying to shoot those really nice tight groups. In addition to all of that, we're going to talk a little bit about our breathing when we're shooting, and we're going to talk about follow through and why it's important, in addition to finding our dominant eye, because a lot of times when we're on the range, I've had times where folks have struggled a little bit, and the root cause was they weren't able to identify what their dominant eye was, which honestly, I guess, in a lot of situations, you might not know that. So we're going to go ahead and start off with that. I am actually cross dominant, meaning that I am right-handed, but I am left eye dominant. So what I want you to do is I want you to find a point on your wall. A lot of times a light switch works really well. Something small that can get your attention. And I want you to put your hands together as such. Okay, we're gonna form a triangle out in front of us, and we're gonna try to really focus on something out there in front of us. So find that light switch, find that little focal point, and I want you to put that in the middle of the triangle formed by your hands, and I want you to just naturally bring your hands back to your face. I don't want you to focus on one eye or the other. I just want you to naturally bring your hands back, and you'll see actually comes back to my left eye. Whichever eye it comes back to is your dominant. What'll happen, and I see this happen a lot, so I get directly in front of people when they're doing this exercise, is as they're coming back, they'll correct, and they keep wanting to try to correct it to bring it back directly to their nose. That's not the point of the exercise. We want to bring our hands back to our face without even thinking about it. So what I tell people that wind up doing that inadvertently, it's subconscious, I understand. We're going to go ahead and we're going to form our hands out same way that I was talking about before, and we're going to focus on that small object, okay? I'm going to tell you that it's a light switch over there. Maybe it's a receptacle, I don't know. We're going to focus on that in the middle of our hands, and you're going to close your right eye first, and then you're going to close your left eye. You're not moving your hands at all. You're just focusing with both eyes open on that object in the middle of the triangle formed by your hands. Close your right eye, close your left eye. Whichever eye you can see it in, that's your dominant eye. If you're still having issues with it, I encourage you, both eyes open, place your thumb over top of an object. I want you to close your right eye, close your left eye, see if that helps you out. Just so happens that sometimes we struggle with being able to identify which eye is dominant. And for some folks, it really does lead to some issues with not being able to properly use your sights. So that leads us right into aiming. We talk about sight picture. This little illustration gives us a basic example of how we want our sights to look when we're aiming downrange. Okay, so we have a channel that's formed by the rear sight. We have a post that is formed by the front sight, and hopefully it has a big white dot on the front of it so that you can really see that thing. Okay, notice that the front sight is equal height with the rear sight, and we have roughly equal light on each side of the front sight post that's inside of that notch. That gives us an indication that we are properly lined up on our sights. Now, we are only able to focus with our eyes on one thing at a time. What that basically means is our focus should be on this front sight. whether it's the very top of this front sight, maybe you've got a wear mark over here on the bluing on your front sight, you can focus on that. Maybe you're just going to focus on this big white dot. But your front sight is where your focal point should always be. Let your target be blurry in the background. Let your rear sight be a little bit blurry in the foreground, but I want you to focus on that front sight. So much so that I don't want you to even see where hits are landing on target. What'll happen a lot of times is folks will be pointing that gun down range, they'll fire a shot, they'll stop and they'll poke their head up and they'll go for around a little bit and they'll see where they're shooting at and they'll come back up and then they'll try to make adjustments, and then the next thing you know, your hits are all over on target. That's not good. We're trying to look for consistency here. So if our sights aren't aligned properly, we can go ahead and make adjustments to those. The general rule for adjusting your sights is move your rear sight in the direction that you want hits to move on target. So if we need to move our hits to the right on target, we're actually going to move our rear sight to the right. Up and down's a little bit more difficult. Maybe you've got adjustable sights on your gun. See how that works. So, sight alignment. Front sight, equal height in the rear sight notch, equal light on either side. Now, let's apply that to the actual target itself. And we're going to have a sight picture. Bear with me. So, we now have a sight picture. Everything just went sideways on me. This sight picture would be roughly a 6 o'clock hold. Our front sight post is at the bottom of the bullseye. So, it would be 6 o'clock on a clock, for those of us that are old enough to remember analog clocks. If we were going to have what we would call a dead-on hold, we would actually move the front sight post further up onto the target so that the front sight post would actually cover the bullseye. That's what we would refer to as a dead-on hold. And again, we're going to focus as much as we can right here on this front sight. So our target's going to be blurry and our rear sight's going to be blurry, but we're going to focus on that front sight. I know my props aren't really high tech, but hopefully it gets the point across to you of what you should be looking for a proper sight picture and for proper sight alignment. So now we're going to talk a little bit about grip. So with grip, I'm going to have you put your hands in the praying hand position. Hopefully by now in life, you know which one of your hands is dominant. Me personally, I'm right-handed. So, strong side, non-dominant side. However you want to word it. Put our hands together in praying hand position. I want you to shift your non-dominant hand up 1 knuckle width. What I'm really looking for more than anything is I want to see those thumbs interlaced like this. We have a natural divot on our support hand or our non-dominant hand that is in between the 2 knuckle joints. And I actually want this last portion of our thumb to nestle right inside of there. Go ahead, move from our praying hand position where we have shifted. I want you to push your hands forward. I want you to go ahead and close the lower 3 fingers of your dominant hand up, because we're going to keep that trigger finger alongside the frame, because we never want to have our finger inside of that trigger until we're ready to shoot. At this point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to wrap our non-dominant hand around our dominant hand, and our thumbs are going to be pointed towards the target. So if we were to put that all together, break out my trusty CERT pistol from Next Level Training, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grip that gun as high as I can. Okay, I want you to make a V or an L with your dominant hand. Place the gun inside the web of the hand. I want you to go ahead and wrap your 3 lower fingers around that pistol. Notice how my thumb is nice, high, and tight on the slide here. My trigger finger is alongside of the frame. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap my support hand around that, my non-dominant hand around my firing hand, strong side. Notice how my thumbs are positioned. Both of them are pointing forward and alongside of the slide. What we're looking for more than anything, this is really important here. Notice how much real estate is left open when I just have one hand on the pistol. We want to get as much meat from our support hand onto that pistol, okay? So I want you to basically place that divot that we talked about from that thumb right up here. We're actually going to wrap everything around. We want to have that nice high and tight position. Notice that I'm not leaving any room between the curve of the back strap of the pistol and the web of my shooting hand. I'm up here real nice, high and tight. And the reason for that is, if we get a loose grip that we see in Hollywood all the time, we're actually going to have more recoil from that gun because the bore axis is going to be higher than our wrist. So we want to make sure that we're nice, high and tight, just as high and tight as we can get on that gun without getting the slide into our hand. Go ahead and wrap that support hand around, and when we push out, this should feel fairly natural. We've got nice, good control of that gun. So one variation on this that I see a lot of times is folks will put the index finger of their support hand up around the front of that trigger guard. There's nothing wrong with that. There's been a lot of national championships won with guys that are shooting that way, ladies that are shooting that way. I'm not going to argue with it. I just personally don't do that. I like to wrap my hand underneath that trigger guard. Whatever feels good for you. One of the things that I don't want to see out here, though, I don't want to see that teacup hold. This used to be really popular in military circles. You're not getting any kind of recoil control off that support hand when you're doing the teacup hold. I also don't want to see you supporting your wrist back here. We're not supporting the gun any with our support hand when we're gripping back here behind our wrist. I don't know where that grip comes from, but it's really not doing anything for you. I want you nice, high and tight up here, and we're actually going to kind of cant our support hand forward about 45 degrees so that we're actually wrapping our pinkies up underneath, the pinky of our support hand up underneath of our strong hand. Again, it's all about recoil control. We're trying to land fast shots on target. If the gun's up here just moving all around, we're not going to be able to land those shots consistently on target, so we really need to focus on being able to get that gun under control. Okay? Another thing I'm going to talk to you about is when we come out here, we grip that gun, I want you to just press straight out from your chest. Okay? I'm not going to teach you this sideways push with this hand, pull with this hand, 80%, 20%. That's too much to think about. You're going to come straight from your chest, press straight out. Okay? It's natural. Bring the gun up to your eye level as well. Okay? I want you to think about that. Bring the gun up to your eye level. I don't want you turtling down to the gun. I don't want you leaning back here to the gun. I want you to just go ahead and bring that gun up to eye level, and I want you to just press straight out from the chest. Okay? You'll see that a little bit more here in a minute when I'm going to show you a proper stance. That's grip. That's the best that I can teach that grip. There are variations. I will tell you that if you're shooting a revolver, first off, think about that. Revolvers are great. For me personally, I just don't know that they're the best defensive tool out there. I shoot a lot of single action revolvers. I shoot a lot of double action revolvers. Personal choice. It's entirely up to you. Just look at all your options that are out there. But if you are going to shoot a revolver, I want you to modify your grip a little bit. So we're going to have our thumbs forward here. When you're shooting a revolver, I actually want you to take your thumbs. I want to take your support hand. I actually want you to cross your thumb over top of your shooting hand thumb and place it down. We're trying to get the thumbs clear of that cylinder because there will be a little bit of blast that comes up from the sides of it. Okay. I'm off my soapbox. Now, I'm going to talk to you about breathing. So, breathing is something that most of us are able to do naturally. And I don't want you to have to think about it too much. So, when we're shooting, when I put people under stress and I put people under pressure, like putting them on the dueling tree against another shooter, you would be amazed how often that I have to tell people to breathe. Breathe. Stress does funny things to us, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's important to introduce stress in your training. So the easiest way that I've found to use breathing to help give you a nice cadence and to minimize movement of the gun, because if we stop breathing long enough, we'll start to shake. When we are breathing, we're going to naturally have that up and down motion of our hands because our core is moving up and down as we're breathing in and out. But we have a natural pause when we take a breath in. At the top of that breath, we'll have a natural pause that we can take advantage of. When we breathe out, we have a natural pause at the bottom of that breath that we can take advantage of to be able to break that shot. So I want you to think about that. When we're on the range, we're putting all of our fundamentals together. You got your gun out here. I want you to breathe in, pause, fire. Breathe out, pause, fire. Breathe in, pause, fire. Really simple. Use the natural cadence of your breathing to your own advantage. This is obviously going to keep you from under the pressure of being out there and just going bam, 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 just cracking off shots. I want you to stop, think, breathe. Breathe in, pause, fire. Breathe out, pause, fire. A little bit of something to work on. We've talked about sight alignment, sight picture, breathing, grip. Let's talk about trigger control a little bit. So, trigger control, go back to my trusty SIRT pistol here. This is actually a little bit more difficult for people than what you might think. Trigger control is one of those things that you only get experience with it when you're actually using a trigger. That's one of the things I really like about the SIRT pistol, is that we have a very realistic feeling trigger, but we don't have any kind of way to put live ammunition into the gun. So we can get feedback from the laser module that shoots out of the muzzle while we're manipulating that trigger. Okay, so without further ado, on most modern defensive pistols, you're going to have a trigger that has a little bit of take up. Okay, you're going to have that soft resistance, and then you're going to feel a little bit harder resistance. I'm going to call that the wall. I want you to push through that straight to the rear until you feel the trigger break like that one did. I want you to hold that trigger to the rear. What'll happen for a lot of folks when we're out on the range is they're excited. They're up here, they pull that trigger and they immediately come off of it, because I've beat into your head now about gun safety, that I want that finger off the trigger unless you're ready to shoot. Truth of the matter is, when our sights are on target, we're ready to shoot. Okay? So, bring up the slack, hit that wall, press straight to the rear, hold it there. Once that shot is fired, I want you to go ahead and release gently until you feel the trigger reset. Press back against the wall, break the trigger straight to the rear, hold it to the rear after the shot, come back forward, find that reset, again, rinse and repeat. What we're trying to do is implement a form of follow through. Think of a football player, quarterback, just threw the ball. He doesn't immediately change his stance. He lets his arm and his upper body follow through after he's thrown the ball. A golfer with their swing, a baseball player with their swing. It all plays in. Follow through, okay? We're not trying to immediately change and go into another position just because we fired that shot. We want to maintain all those fundamentals once the shot is broke until we're ready to fire that next shot. Okay? With that, we've talked about all the other fundamentals. I'm going to step back here and we're going to talk a little bit about stance. Okay? Okay, so when we're talking about stance, there are two major trains of thought as far as defensive pistol shooting. One is isosceles, which is natural and easy to assume, and the other is Weaver, which is the method that I used to use almost exclusively. So I'm going to start you off with Weaver, which is basically assuming a boxer's type stance where we're going to lean our non-dominant foot forward, pointing towards the target. We're going to angle our hips off the target roughly 45 degrees. Our shooting side foot is going to be angled out at about 45 degrees. We're going to put about 60% of our weight on the forward foot. Our shoulders are going to be pointed forward, but we're going to be pushing with our shooting hand and pulling with our non-dominant hand. And that's just a whole lot of stuff to be going on all at once. Plus, if I need to engage a target to my left, I can go about 90 degrees here, and I can go about 90 degrees here. Mind you, my mobility is a little bit limited due to my younger days. But if we move into the isosceles stance, it's just like I'm standing here talking to you. I'm squared up with you. My shoulders are squared up. My hips squared up. My knees are squared up. My feet are squared up. My feet are about shoulder width apart. My knees are kind of loose. My hips going to be back just a little bit from where my shoulders are. I'm going to lean slightly forward with my shoulders. Mind the airplane going overhead again. And we're going to be presenting the gun forward just by simply pressing out from our chest. Okay? So this is where this stance gets its name from, isosceles. Because if we were to look at a person assuming this position from the top, their shoulders and their arms, if we drew a line through them, would form a triangle. Now, I'm going to turn to my right, about 90 degrees. I'm going to show you a couple things that I don't want to see. I see this a lot when we're on the range. People bring the gun up, and then they bring their head back to try to line the sights up. It's a natural response, but I really don't want to see that. What I want to see is shoulders slightly forward to the hips, bring the gun up to eye level. Once you get those sights on target, when you're ready, put your finger in the trigger guard, go ahead and take up that slack, squeeze straight to the rear, through the wall, hold that trigger to the rear, ride that reset, rinse and repeat. What we'll also see sometimes is people get really excessive on this whole nose over toes thing. And we do this. And that's kind of counterproductive too, because that also limits our mobility. So again, isosceles stance, this is what I teach in my classes, this is what I believe in, this is what I use when I'm shooting competitively, is shoulder width apart, knees loose, hips are a little bit loose. I want my shoulders rolled just forward of my hips, present the gun up to eye level, fire. Super easy stuff, guys. So, with all of that, we've walked through the fundamentals of pistol shooting. We've talked about sight alignment, sight picture. Where do we need to focus when we're trying to shoot? Because our eye can only focus one thing at a time, so we always need to try to focus on that front sight. Don't go chasing your shots on the target. Make sure you breathe. Super important. That's not just when you're shooting either. There's a free tip for you. We've talked about all these fundamentals. We've talked about getting that nice, good combat type grip. You want to be nice and high and tight on that gun. You want your support hand to help you control that recoil. Don't do the teacup. Don't do the wrist support. If you are shooting a revolver, make sure you cross those thumbs up. I really can't think anything else to cover in this episode. So with that, I'm going to tell you to please train safe, train hard, stay safe, and always shoot straight. Have a wonderful day.